G'day there guys, it's your main man Markee, back at it again with another episode of r/entitled Now if you love this content, I want you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn on the barbie, and enjoy the content. Posted by user 1SL1KK1, titled, Crazy lady accuses me of kidnapping my stepson, tries to kidnap him from me. So this happened about a week ago, and I honestly am still fuming from this. I'm not sure if this belongs in this subreddit, but here goes. First, a little backstory. I'm a mixed ethnicity individual. I've been confused for many races over the course of my 29 years on this planet, but I'm literally Caucasian and African American. Usually it can be figured out, but the difference with me is my father is the Caucasian, so therefore my hair is straight. I'm originally from Texas and am usually confused for being Mexican, but now I live in Massachusetts and have never had an issue with anyone concerning my race. Until this day. Also, I'm married to a Caucasian woman who had a child before we were married. His father is not in his life as much, and I took the responsibility because I love this woman, and I love this little boy as if he were my own. He's 4 now, and I've been in his life since he was 1. Anyways, on to the story. My wife needed a few things from the grocery store, and she needed to run a few more errands, and usually she just goes and knocks things out herself because I'm asleep. I work nights. But this particular day, I happened to be awake, and I offered to go for her. She works hard and does a lot, so I definitely felt it was necessary to do something for her so she could just relax for the day. I took my son with me so she could rest up and just take it easy, and it gave me time to spend with my son for some bonding. We completed all of the errands, which went smoothly, and then we headed to the grocery store to finish up our day. My son, being a typical 4-year-old, was full of energy, running ahead of me, laughing, and speaking to everyone he comes across, which I generally don't mind as long as he doesn't hit anyone and stays within eye view. As I'm making my way down an aisle looking for canned corn, my son jogs to the end of it, when an older lady is entering at the other end. My son, being the sweet social butterfly he is, approached and exclaims an excited, "Hi, me 4 and me Ryan." Bless his little heart. The lady looked down and says, "Well, hello there. You shouldn't be running around unattended. Let's go find your parents." I don't think anything of her statements because I assumed she just hadn't seen me. "Ryan, come back here, bud, please." He excitedly runs back towards me and starts turning in circles because, he's 4, lol. I'm still searching the shelves as the lady walks past me and stops behind me. Again, I think nothing of it because it's a grocery store and you have to share the aisles. I turn my basket around and start to walk towards the front cash registers when this lady literally blocks my path. I say, "Excuse me," and try to walk around her, and she moves her cart in front of me again. I honestly thought she was just getting confused and said "excuse me" once again and tried one more time to go around, and she just blocks my path. The following convo ensues. Sorry about that, we'll get out of your way." "Oh, I don't think so. You're not going anywhere with that child." "You mean my son?" "That's not your child. He's white and you're Mexican. You probably didn't even know his name until he said it to me." "Sure, whatever lady, can you just move? My wife is at home and anxiously waiting for us." "Stop your lies. You're not taking him anywhere, you pervert." This whole time, my son is standing close to me holding my leg because he was honestly getting scared. I was getting angry because I hadn't had much sleep, and I have a short fuse anyway. "Thanks, Dad." I say, "As you can see, he's standing close to me because he trusts me, and you're scaring him. So how about you buzz off?" "No, he's scared because of you. He just doesn't know how to express it yet." She looks at my son. "Come on now, sweetie. I'm here to rescue you. Come with me." Thankfully, my son was able to communicate to her he wasn't going anywhere with her, but she was having none of it. She literally grabbed my son and began to run. It caught me off guard because I honestly could not fathom what was actually happening. My son starts screaming loudly because he was so scared, and this lady is just like, "Don't worry, sweetie, he won't hurt you, I promise." Suddenly, I snap back into reality, and I begin to chase after this crazy wench. While running through the store, I yell for people to stop her and that she's kidnapping my son. And thankfully, a worker stops her before she makes the exit. "Why are you stopping me? This Mexican here is trying to kidnap my grandson." My son is literally bawling his eyes out and extending his arms out, calling for me. This lady was relentless and would not let go of my son even after he slaps her face multiple times. I laughed a little, I'm not gonna lie. At this point, a manager shows up and asks what's going on. The lady spoke before me. This, pointing at me, pervert, is trying to kidnap my grandson and I was just trying to escape. That's my son, you freaking psycho, now let him go. The manager didn't know what to believe. I don't blame him. He was caught in a weird situation. So I pulled out my phone and showed him pictures of me and my son that dated a year or so back as proof. This lady still would not give up and accused me of faking them. Like, how would you do that exactly? I'll never know, but whatever. Sadly, there were 2 other ladies there taking the psycho's side and said I was attempting to kidnap my own son because there was no way we were family because of our different skin tones. One even called the police, which I was actually happy about because I knew they'd be able to review the security cameras. Even still, I called my wife to see if she could come to the store to get this situation cleared up quicker. As soon as I told her what was going on, she zoomed to the store. She got there about the same time as the police. The crazy ladies were giving their statements to the cops when my wife walked in. As soon as she walked in, my son goes, "Mama, help!" My wife is a true mama bear, and she immediately flew into a rage when she saw this lady holding my son. "Let go of him now!" "Sorry, sweetie, I was just trying to protect him from this pervert over here. Yeah, we saw him trying to kidnap him, but this lady saved him." The cop looks at the lady and is confused. "I thought this was your grandson." "Oh, I have no idea who that lady is." She takes out her phone and shows the officer a picture of my mother-in-law. "Okay, I'm sorry he's not my grandson, but I was only trying to protect him from this dirty pervert over here." "Yeah, I witnessed the whole thing. He snatched that child and tried to run away with him, but this lady stopped it." "Yeah, I saw it too. He needs to be arrested. And you," pointing to my wife, "should be thankful that this lady was here to save your son, because you obviously just let him loose wherever." "Who are you talking about again?" All 3 crazy ladies pointed at me. "Oh, you mean my husband?" "Husband? Yeah, who do you think called me and got me here so fast?" I presented my ID to the officer and the manager, and my wife did the same. We also each showed us pictures of us on our phones to prove we were really a family. The cop nodded in approval and handed us our phones back and jotted down a few notes. The 3 ladies for some reason still kept trying to say this is all fake, and my wife was in on the kidnapping and said we needed to be arrested. My wife lost it at this point and let off some colourful words. I won't repeat here, but she definitely got her point across. Then the nail in the coffin came from the psycho trio. The officer turns to the manager and asks, "Sir, did the cameras work here?" "Yes, we have them inside and out." "Okay, great, let's go review." The 3 ladies' faces went pale, like ghostly pale. The officer reviewed the outside camera as I pulled into the parking lot and saw me take my son out of the car, and then as I went up and down the aisles, and most importantly, the instance when the woman snatched up my son and began to run. Upon his return, he asks, "Would you like to press charges?" And Lady 1 says, "Yes, I would." "Why would I be asking you that question? Shut your mouth and sit down." He turns to me and repeats the question, and I say, "Absolutely." Lady 1 was charged with attempted kidnapping, false imprisonment, providing a false police report, and child endangerment. The other 2 were also charged with providing a false police report as well. To make matters worse for Lady 1, my son bruises easily, and she left some terrible spots on him from where she was grasping him. But he's fine. This added a charge of child abuse to her rap sheet. I have court later this year, but I'm not sure when because of COVID. The officer will be following up with me in a few weeks. Sorry for the length. Posted by user Sayonite, titled, "Entitled teacher calls CPS on me because I refuse to talk to her about my mum." Long-time lurker here. I have dealt with my fair share of entitled people, both in school and at work, and have so many stories to tell, but this one I remember so vividly. I'm also not a native English speaker, so mistakes may be made. For context, my mum was in and out of the hospital when I was around 10 to 13 years old because of bipolar disorder, and by the time this all went down, when I was 15, my mum was doing better, home, and she was even working. So in my final year of secondary school, one of my teachers began pulling me out of class in the middle of lessons, and at first, She just wanted to chat about my grades, which were average. But then she started asking more and more intrusive questions about my mum and her illness, and began to compare my mother's illness to her mother, who apparently had suffered from the same thing, and began telling me sob stories about her childhood. She also began asking me uncomfortable questions about my home life. I didn't say much, just sat there feeling very confused about it all. This happened over the course of 3 months, and eventually I got really sick of her pulling me out of the classroom in the middle of lessons, and I snapped. I told her to stop pulling me out of classes and leave me the hell alone. I turned to leave and go back to class. She grabs me by the arm and tells me that if I continue to withhold information, she would have to call the CPS. I told her to call them. They wouldn't find anything and she'd be wasting their time. A few days later, I get called out of the classroom, not by her, but by my principal, who takes me to her office where a CPS worker, my mum, and my dad is waiting. I realized I already knew the woman. She had been at our house sometimes while my mum was ill. The CPS worker, my parents and I talked, and she came to the conclusion that everything was fine, but I broke down in tears because the whole situation had been really stressful. My parents were ticked. They demanded to know why the hell this teacher thought it was okay to harass me about something that was none of her business. We never got a proper answer, and the teacher refused to say anything. She stared daggers at me though. The CPS lady was angry about having her time wasted and demanded some type of action from the principal. The teacher was not allowed to be in the room alone with me anymore, and under no circumstance to take me out of classroom alone. Eventually, she was moved to another class, and later let go for harassment and assault of another student. By the way, I didn't tell my parents because I was a dumb kid, thinking I was the one who would get in trouble about it. Posted by user EagleEye295, titled, Karen throws a small wine rack on the ground because I ordered it. Hello Reddit, I'm Belgian, so if I make any mistakes, I'm sorry. A little context first. Every year on the second Sunday of June, it's Father's Day. For Father's Day, I ordered and paid for a small wine rack with 6 wines in it online. So on to the story. Names are changed, obviously. Characters are Karen, the 40-year-old woman without Karen haircuts, Josh, a male employee in the store, Sarah, a female employee in the store and friend of mine, good guy Brian for short, who's the store owner, and me. The store in which I ordered it has a regular line and a reserved line. The regular line, the usual. You get in after you took your stuff off the shelves. The reserved line is for people who ordered something online. This so they can get their stuff without having to wait in line. So the regular line was pretty long, around 7 people, but the reserved line was free. So having ordered and paid online, I set myself in the reserved line. This did not sit well with a Karen. She says, "Sir, you have to wait in the back of the line." "No, I don't. Karen cuts me off. "Yes, you do. It's against the law." "Oh no, here we go again." "Ma'am, I've ordered online," and she cuts me off again. "I don't care what you did or who you are, you have to wait in the back of the line like everyone else." She looks around for support, but no one was with her on this one. By this time, the Josh saw what was happening and tried to explain to Karen what was happening. Didn't really pay attention to the conversation, but she was off my back. So I give Sarah my order number. She goes to the back, comes back with my package, and I go home happy. I wish that happened, but this would not be a good one if it did though, so here is what happened. During the time that I gave my order and she got back with my package, the other employee was done explaining things to Karen. Don't know if he gave up or if Karen brushed him off in the end, but I get my package, turn around, and see Karen storming to me, takes my package out of my hands, I was a bit surprised about how strong she was, and throws it on the ground. The wine rack foot was bent and 4 of the 6 bottles broken. She says, "There, now you have to get a new one and stand in the back of the line like everyone else." I'm dumbfounded. Sarah says, "What the frick?" Takes phone. "Yeah, Brian, can you come to the counter? We have a situation." "Well, what are you waiting for? Go get your stuff and get in the back of the line." Starts to go back to her place. "What is wrong with you, woman? What is wrong with you, young man? You cannot cut in line. It's against the law." Meanwhile, Brian arrives. Brian separates both of us and gets our statements. Apparently, according to her, I cut in line and when she was stopping me, threw the wine rack to her. Then Brian goes away for a second to check the camera footage. No change in Karen's face though. Comes back. Following conversation goes, "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the store." "Why? I didn't break the law. He did," pointing at me. "Why should I leave? I haven't even paid for my stuff." "Please leave the store or the police will be called." "Call them. They'll say that I'm in the right." Brian sighs, takes out his cell phone and dials the police. A few moments pass by and the police come. Take statements from me, Karen and Brian. Karen went again with the throw the wine rack excuse. Police go to the back of the room for the camera footage. Come back and escort her in cuffs to the police car. The whole time she was yelling, "This is against the law. I was in my right. You can't do this. What about him?" One of the police comes over and says, "Technically what she did is assault. Do you want to press charges?" "Hell yes." "Then let me sign a paper with my statement and wish me a happy day further." The owner of the store replaced the wine rack with another one they still have in the store, but this one was with more expensive wine. Mine was €80 in total, this one was €95, but didn't charge me for the extra €15. Posted by user Wafer2016, titled, "The Waitress Licked My Mother's Plate," or How My Inner Karen Was Released. Hello, happy people. This story takes place several years ago in a time filled with pre-pandemic innocence. People were free to eat at restaurants and actually sit in the dining room at the tables. A wild concept, I know, but there you go. My mother and I like to frequent a well-known Canadian restaurant chain known for their delicious rotisserie chicken and sweet potato fries. Do not forget the sweet potato fries. Oh my Frank, they are so good, but I digress. One night, just before Christmas, that year, we decided we wanted chicken for supper. So we bundled up in our many layers and headed on over to Miss Chalet. See what I did there? The hostess sat us next to the fireplace, Christmas music was playing softly, and we were filled with anticipation of the delicious meal to come. We decided to start with the baked garlic loaf, a drippy, buttery monstrosity that is delivered to the table under a mountain of diced onions and tomatoes. Having placed our orders, we sat back and chatted idly about stuff that I can't remember now. We had noticed our server seemed a bit snappish and dismissive. Okay, she was a tramp. Shoot, the Grinch was frickin' Barney the dinosaur compared to her. Maybe her shoes were too tight, or her apron was upside down, or maybe her heart was 2 sizes too small. Whatever the issue, her heart or her shoes, our server clearly disliked her job. After a while, our noses were greeted with the beautiful scent of garlicky goodness, and our delicious buttery loaf was placed before us, along with 2 empty plates for us to use. All was great until I looked at my mother's plate and saw it had a huge dirty smudge on it. Ew! I got the server's attention and pointed out the dirty plate, and this is where our wonderful, candy cane-scented evening went to hell in a handbasket. What I'm about to reveal is the absolute truth, with not one smidgen of exaggeration. The waitress took my mother's plate, licked her thumb, rubbed the dirt off with said spit-covered thumb, and then handed Mum her plate back and said, "Here you go." I stopped dead, looked at my poor mother who was looking equally stunned, and then turned and glared at the server. My mother would like a new plate now. Server huffed. Fine. Flounced over to the counter and got my mum a new plate. I was able to watch the entire time as it was within my view, so I made sure it remained spit-free. After she slapped the plate on the table and stalked away, I waved another server over and asked for the manager. Manager came over and I quietly explained what had just happened, and she was horrified. This is where the evening took another bizarre turn. The manager apologized, naturally, and offered us free pie, Miss Chalet's go-to response for unhappy customers, and told me to call head office, so they can be made aware of it too. I don't know what kind of drama was going on behind the scenes, but a manager asking me to call the big bosses for her. Weird, right? Next morning, I did as asked, and called the head office. I was greeted with complete silence for a few minutes after sharing my story of garlicky woe. Then the rep squeaked out, "That is not proper Miss Chalet serving standards." We were given a gift card for a free meal for both of us, and after an internal investigation, the entire staff was sent for retraining on proper ways to serve customers, which, oddly enough, includes not licking the plates. Yeah, dirty boy. Posted by user Title Lion, titled, "People using a loophole so they can vacation in other countries and follow no self-isolation protocols." So I saw on Facebook today a post about some Texans vacationing in BC. They told border security that they were headed to Alaska, but told restaurant staff that they were taking a detour to vacation in British Columbia. The post said that they were not wearing masks or PPE, no social distancing, the visitors have no plans to self-isolate, etc. Decided to fact-check, and while the article doesn't mention everything the post did, the rest of the story checks out. This is by Global News, titled "American Tourists in Alberta, RCMP, Investigating Possible Breaches of COVID-19 Restrictions." Seriously? It's a global pandemic, and you want to abuse the system to say you're headed home to Alaska, but just so you can go on vacation, at the risk of exposing others? How entitled do you have to be? Posted by user Just Anonym Wolf, titled, "She Took My Cat." This is both a rant and a request for help. My cat is not an indoors cat. She's an outside one. I tried to get her to stay inside, but she's a big one that loves climbing the huge trees and chasing feral cats. She did occasionally go inside, but after a time she would always wait by the door to go outside, and she always came back. She responds to her name, she responds to commands, and behaves in such a way, we sometimes call her the guard cat. It's been a week since I saw her. I was worried. I didn't know what to do until I was outside with some neighbors. They knew her very well, and they said it was strange that they haven't seen her around. And then an old lady walked by and said, "That black cat, you mean?" "Well, she's not black, she's spotted, and she's not that cat. She's cat." Replaced name because it's foreign and hard to spell. No, she's Little Puff. She's mine. I took her in. It's the best for her. Outside is not a place for a cat. I can't believe you taught her such bad manners. She only stays by the door. Who knows how you beat her that she's so afraid to stay inside? How dare you? How dare you? I was really angry at this point. I really care about cats, and I can't believe someone is forcing her inside. Another neighbor says, "What rotten soul do you have inside that you steal others' pets?" What a fuss you make about such a good thing. I adopted her, and you're lucky I didn't call animal control on you for animal abuse. Let cat out. She's not an inside cat. You're stressing her. You don't even know her. She'll bite your hand when you pet her wrong. That's the bad manners you gave to Little Puff. I'll teach her discipline, and you can't prove it's yours, can you? That's heartless. Give her cat back. You should be more wise at your age. I'm surrounded by idiots. And she ran inside. And she's right. It's not like I have a certificate for cat or anything. You usually don't have papers for pets here unless there's some breed. And you want to prove that. How do I get cat back? This sounds like a stage play. Update. First things first. I want to thank you all for the advice and shared your stories and so on. You've been a great help. Yesterday, I gathered all evidence I could that cat is mine, but most of my photos with her were with her alone, and I was a bit worried, until we struck the gold mine. My sister had a video, old one, of us hanging around with cat inside, with cat getting scratches from both of us. I went that evening to the old lady, but she didn't answer the door. It was dark outside, so I figured she was asleep. I talked to her neighbor instead, who said she'll be looking for cats. I didn't sleep much, but I met with my neighbors today, and a lot of people because there's nothing faster than the word of mouth in a village. We discussed what we should do, showed them the proof I had, and we decided the police wasn't going to help. There were multiple stories from them about police don't care, or even worse, giving them fines for wasting police time, and that is how it is for villagers. So instead, we decided to go together to the old lady with the proof I gathered. There were so many people. At first, old lady didn't answer the door, but we kept insisting and some people started yelling, "Give cat back! Give cat back! Give cat back!" She answered the door finally, and a shouting match started. I don't remember much of it, but I remember very well when one guy shouted above everyone else, "We're not leaving until you give Cat back!" A couple of shouting between both parts, and then it was over. Old lady went inside to release Cat as she was outnumbered by a lot and couldn't fight the whole village. If you are wondering how she kept Cat inside, she had Cat tied to a bed leg with a blue rope used for making hay bales. I wish I could say Cat ran faster than everything, but that's how she runs always. We left old lady's place and headed for mine. Some people left, and there were fewer by the time we reached my house, but in the walnut tree in her usual place, there was Cat. And after I thanked them and they said stuff like "You're welcome," they left me to attend to Cat. Her fur looked a bit rough. She came down from the tree when I called her. She didn't want to go inside, so I brought her food outside. I stayed with her until she finished eating, got her some water too, but she wasn't interested. I got close to her and scratched behind her ears, her favorite, and she had nothing against it. I looked her over. She didn't seem to have any injury or part that hurts. You could see against her fur where she was tied, but it didn't go into her skin, so that's good. After we hanged out a bit more, she climbed back in the tree to stay in her favorite place. I'll stay outside a little bit more. I talked to the village vet, and he doesn't have what he needs to get her microchipped. I thought so, therefore I'll be taking Cat to the city in the next days. I'm so thankful she's back, and for your and village people's help. You could say that I see what I want to see, but the male goose looked a bit happy too, as he doesn't need to fend off ferrets alone anymore. The guard cat is back. Posted by user Panacito de Azucar, titled, "Karen tries to use my mother to get free breakfast." This happened a few months ago. English is not my main language, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes that I may commit. Our cast are Karen, Karen's daughter, my mum, my dad, myself, the manager, and the waitress. So, me and my parents like to go out to have breakfast every Sunday, or that's what we did before this pandemic. And on that particular day, we were in one of our favorite restaurants, located in a mall, without suspecting what was going to happen. My mum ordered a club sandwich, and just before she took the first bite, she noticed something was out of place. Among the salad was a blue wire, the kind that is wrapped in plastic and used in bread bags to keep them closed. She quickly called out our waitress and explained the situation in a very discreet way. The waitress apologized, took the plate away, offered to bring her a free courtesy dish, and said she would talk to the manager. Thinking back, maybe the word free was what made Karen notice us. Right next to our table was a woman, Karen, and her daughter, Karen's daughter. When the waitress went away, Karen suddenly began to talk to us. She says, "That was awful. They should have been more careful. You could have chocked if you'd eaten that." Good thing I noticed before I started eating. Yes, maybe the cooking staff should have paid more attention while serving, but we weren't particularly angry about it. Mistakes happen, and Sunday morning is always a bussy time at that place. As my mother said, no one got hurt, so we just let it slide. Karen, on the other hand, proceeded to complain as if the wire had been in her plate instead of my mum's. She told us about this time someone she knew, friend, sister, I don't remember, found a nail in their plate at another restaurant and sued the place. I doubt it was true. I feel like she was trying to impress us. My parents were acting polite, just playing along, probably thinking Karen was just a concerned woman. I was silent for the most part, wishing she would just shut the hell up, while I noticed that Karen's daughter was silent as well, and that she had this expression of absolute misery in her face. Now that I think about it, it was a signal that Karen usually displayed that behavior quite often. The manager finally came, and because of the fuss Karen was making, thought she was the one who had the problem and apologized to her. The waitress corrected him, and then he talked to my mother. Manager says, "We're very sorry. Please feel free to order what you want, free of cost. I'd like to have another club sandwich, please." "No, you should order something more expensive. They committed a mistake. You deserve it." Karen's daughter quietly says, "Mum, please stop." Mum, getting angry at Karen, says, "A club sandwich is fine. Thanks." The waitress and the manager retired, and we thought that was all, but we were wrong. Karen still complained about what had happened, and in a not-so-quiet or discreet manner, basically said that my mum was stupid for not taking an opportunity when provided. She says, if it had been me, I would have sued this place for endangering my life. Karen's daughter, slightly raising her voice, says, "Mum, please just stop. That didn't even happen to you." Eventually, the waitress came back with my mum's sandwich, and at that point, my dad and I were angry and wanted to tell Karen to stop with her complaining and bad-mouthing. But my mum insisted we ignored her and tried to enjoy our breakfast the best we could. Karen and her daughter finished eating, and finally went away. We sighed with relief, thought that this was over and would have some peace. But no, again, we were wrong. The waiter says to my father shyly, "Excuse me, sir, could you come with me, please? Is there something wrong? We just need you to clear a misunderstanding. If this is because of my wife's incident, there's no problem from our part. We understand it was an accident. Do not worry." The waiter, looking extremely embarrassed, says, "Yes, it's because of that. There's this woman with the cashier claiming to be the missus, my mum's sister, and requesting a null bill for herself on your behalf." My dad practically stormed out. My mum asked me to follow him, and so I did, just in time to see Karen yelling at the cashier, a young woman, and the manager trying to calm the situation. She says, "My sister and I have agreed to sue this place because your irresponsibility nearly killed her. You put a piece of wire in her plate, and you still want me to pay for my meal? That's enough. You've been disrespectful to my wife and the ladies, the waitress and the cashier. You are the worst kind of person and are in no way related to me. Stop lying and pay your bill already." My dad is the kind of person who rarely gets angry, and when he does, he gets extremely serious. So I was really surprised to see him like that. I want to clarify that he isn't a violent person, but I had never seen him yelling at someone like that before. I also noticed that Karen's daughter was crying right behind Karen, talking on her cell phone, and couldn't help to feel sorry for her because honestly, she did nothing wrong, and her only fault was having Karen as a mother, something that she couldn't have chosen. Looking back, I wish I had approached her to tell her that I knew none of this was her fault, and that I noticed she was trying to calm her mother, and we didn't blame her for anything. Meanwhile, another waiter arrived with the mall's security. They made sure Karen paid her bill, then escorted her outside, with her poor daughter following from afar. The manager apologized again, and because of the incident with Karen, cancelled our bill. Despite this, my parents and I agreed to leave half of our total bill as a tip because the staff was in no way responsible for our bad experience, and they suffered from it too. Still, I doubt we will return to the same restaurant out of embarrassment, or as we say in my country, que pincha peña. Lady yells at me for giving Husky heatstroke. So anyone that knows anything about Huskies is that they are double-coated. Their coats are meant to protect them from both heat and cold. Because of this, you shouldn't ever shave a Husky except for medical reasons. I just need everyone to understand this before I explain what happened. I have an elderly neighbor. I've been walking her dog Mo for a couple of years now. He's a big fluffy Husky that loves playing with his frisbee. Due to restrictions slowly being lifted, it's safe to take him on walks again. I don't take him far, just to a little baseball field down the road where he can play in a fenced area for a bit. The other day, I took Mo out to the fields and we were doing our thing. On the other side of the fence are some mailboxes, and a car pulled up to them. I was focused on Mo, so I didn't pay attention to the woman that got out of it until she started yelling at me. Your car star me, yours truly, entitled lady, and sweet neighbor lady. I had just thrown the frisbee and Mo went after it with a vengeance, when entitled lady started yelling. When I look over, she's practically climbing the fence. I say, "Can I help you?" She says, "What do you think you're doing with that poor animal? Do you realize how hot it is? Why haven't you shaved off all that fur? The poor dear is probably dying of heat stroke." Now, if you looked at Mo, he was fine, bouncing around all happy like a good doggo. And I had a couple bottles of water and a bowl in my bag for him. "Ma'am, he's a Husky. You can't shave his coat." Teenagers these days. I'm 21, mate. Don't know what they're talking about. Any vet would tell you you have to shave your dog's fur when it gets hot out. Not with double-coated dogs. He needs his coat in order to stay cool. I'll spare you the next 10 minutes on repeat the same argument. She kept insisting I was going to give him heatstroke. Finally, I had enough and hooked Mo to his leash to take him back home. Guys, this crazy witch followed me back to my nice neighbor's house. I was really creeped out, but I took Mo up and knocked on the door. SN was grateful for my help and paid me in customary batch of baked goods. But before I could walk away, Entitled Lady stormed up to the door. I couldn't make out what she was saying as she was screaming so loud at Sweet Neighbor Lady. What I did make out at the end? I'm gonna call the police on you for animal cruelty. You do that, dear. I'll be here with my darling boy waiting for them. And she closed the door in her face. The look of self-righteous anger on this woman's face was priceless. She stomps off back to her car, and I went back to my house. I sat on my deck watching the lady talk on the phone in her car. Turns out she actually did call the police. Now, I wasn't actually around when the cops showed up, but Sweet Neighbor Lady told me it was all pretty cut and dry. The officer checked out her puppet, saw nothing wrong, and left. Entitled Lady was furious Mo wasn't taken away and came pounding on Sweet Neighbor Lady's door. Sweet Neighbor Lady didn't even bother opening the door, just told her to leave or she would be reported for trespassing. And we haven't seen heads or tails of the woman since. Posted by user Nightingale Grey, 15. Titled, Entitled Teacher Tries to Give Me Detention at a School That I Don't Go To. I saw a similar story to this on r/entitled parents, and it reminded me of this. If there's a sub that better fits this story, please feel free to let me know and I'll remove it from this sub. Let's start with background info. So this happened 2 years ago when I was in my junior year of high school. I was involved in a group at our high school that was pretty much in charge of going to middle schools and telling them about high school and how to get involved. You know, all that boring stuff. We went to one middle school that is notoriously known for having really entitled teachers. Another important detail to mention is that I'm a relatively short dude, so people sometimes mistake me for looking a lot younger than I am, despite being nearly an adult. Now onto the story. I'll include dialogue, but everything is more paraphrased considering this happened almost 2 years ago, and I, of course, can't remember exactly everything everyone said. The cast are me, friend 1, 2, and the entitled teacher. So this whole thing starts when we enter the school. The teacher from our high school who drove us to the school left to go to the office to sign us in and told us to head to the library. We do as we're told and start walking to the library. As we are, we come across a wall showing past graduates. The 2 girls I was with both went to this school, so we stopped so we could look at the photos. I pull out my phone to just check my texts while I wait for them. In comes entitled teacher, and they say in a very entitled tone, you know the one, "What are you 3 doing here?" "Oh, we're just looking at the old photos." She assumed the teacher would have known we were here for the high school presentation, and that was a mistake. "Get back to class, now." She then looks at me, who was looking up at her from my phone, and says, "Give me your phone." No, thanks. I really didn't know how to respond. The girls made fun of me for saying this after all this happened. It was a joke for a while. Entitled teacher, holding out her hand, says, "Give me your phone. No phones during school hours." At this point, we all realized she was unaware of the high school presentation. "Oh, we don't go to this school. We're here for the presentation, and just wanted to look at the I don't want to hear your excuses. You've all been terribly rude to me. Go down to the office now, or I'll call your parents." I was shocked at this, considering my middle school was never like this. When I talked to the girls after, they said this sort of behavior was normal from teachers at this school, but they assumed the teacher was new, considering they had never seen her before. "Sorry, but we really don't go to this school. We're just going to head to the library now." "No, you are not. Give me your phone and I'm calling your parents." She then tries to reach for my phone, so I back up and put my phone in my pocket and say, "Don't touch my property." Entitled teacher, looking absolutely offended that I disobeyed her, says, "This behavior will not be tolerated. Tell me your teacher's name and I will make sure your phone is locked up for the rest of the day while you are in detention." This is just a summary of what she said. She rambled on a bit about respect. At this point, we are saved by our actual teacher coming down the hall from the office. She stops and asks what the problem is, and we explain. Entitled teacher looked horrified and instantly apologized, acting all nice. We were ticked, but quickly moved on from the incident and went to do our presentation. That's pretty much it. Not as exciting as some others, but hope you enjoyed nonetheless. Posted by user Doctor Who All the Way, titled, "My sister-in-law is angry at me for saving her kids." A long time ago, when I lived with my ex-husband, I was a free babysitter for his sister's kids. We all lived in 2 stories building. Top floor was hers, her husband and 2 daughters, middle was the parent-in-laws, and my ex and me have a basement turned into a flat. I was used as a babysitter in times when I was out of work, and I took care of 2 girls. One was 3 years old, the other from her birth until she was 2, and her sister 5. Then I started collecting a fee, and sister-in-law was very angry at that. Before, she could ask me to stay with her kids and not have to pay, but my job gives me very little money, so I needed that to pay for my rent and shopping. A few months after I stopped babysitting, I was coming back from work, and I see sister-in-law's kids running from the house to the street. It was late winter, so no snow, but still cold, and they were only in t-shirts and tights. I called to them to come back home. The younger one turned around to come back inside, but the older little brat that she was just started running faster. I caught up with her before she reached the street, and then she said, "My mummy said that I can." That was a lie. That was the lie that she said every time I caught her doing something bad. And yes, her mother and grandmother spoil her rotten. Her sister was listening to me because she knew that I would always tell her why and will not be angry, just ask questions. And yes, their mother screamed at them a lot. I pull the kid back to the house and she's crying. Sister-in-law finally comes out with mother-in-law. Why is she crying? I did not let her run to the street. She did not let me play. My poor baby. Why did you hurt her? I did not. Just did not let some car run her over. Where are her clothes? There was no car, and you screamed at her. I did not. What if there was a car, though? Well, there wasn't. She was just playing. In only a t-shirt? Outside? In the freezing cold? Well, you're not her mother. Then the younger girl peeks out from the open front door, and I tell her to go inside, kid. It's cold. Sister says, "Stop ordering my children around. You're no longer their babysitter." True. And I won't be until you pay me. And I'm going out. But you just got here. I know. Bye. I return a few hours later, and my ex-husband gives me a lecture about acting around his family. I was irresponsible and unpleasant to them, and I have to admit, I cried. That guy knew how to push my buttons to make me feel guilty. It was not long before I divorced his narcissistic backside. That's an oof from me. Posted by user Anonymous Mummy, titled, "Entitled woman thinks she can touch my drinks and kid. How dare you drink coffee while pregnant?" I'm 8 months pregnant, 26 female, and this takes place in March, a little over 2 months ago. I was in a coffee shop, enjoying my evening with my 3 kids, 2 female, 4 female, 6 female, and I just ordered hot chocolates for my 2 oldest babies and milk for my youngest. I also ordered a hot tea for myself. When my name was called, there was a woman about 60 or so there. We'll call her Karen. She saw me reach for the tray with the drinks, but she got to them first and threw the drinks in the trash, crying about how I was being irresponsible and should not drink coffee pregnant. The thing was, my oldest, we'll call her Lucy, was standing beside me and she started crying and hugging my leg. The barista saw this and she made us more drinks, and again, Karen did the same thing. Lucy was crying harder, which got my other 2 kids, we'll call the 4-year-old Sophie, and the youngest will be Erica, to start crying. I picked Erica up, and Karen snatched her from my arms. Here is the conversation. "How irresponsible are you? First ordering coffee for you and these very young kids, now holding a child while pregnant? Give me my daughter now. No, I'll hold on to her for you. I'm a better parent than you. Listen, lady, I ordered milk for my youngest, hot chocolate for my other 2, and tea for myself, and you have no right to touch any of my kids. Give me my damn daughter, you tramp." At this point, the cops came? I assumed someone in the cafe called them, most likely the barista. The cops asked me if I wanted to press charges since where I'm from, it's illegal to touch anyone without their or their parents. If it is a child under 16, you need permission. So I told them yes. I don't know what happened after the cops took her away and gave Erica back. The cafe refunded me for my drinks, made more, gave them to me, and gave me free pastries since they felt bad. I tried to decline it, but they insisted. This is Karen's fantasy. This is absolutely Karen's fantasy. It's everyone else's problem, not mine. Posted by user SquidderDiddly5634. Titled, Entitled woman thinks she can talk down to me and then acts innocent when teacher confronts her. So, I'm 12 and I'm going to a childcare at my school. There are notices everywhere and at every entrance saying no dogs, but people do it anyway, and it's really annoying. We were playing hide and seek. There is not much to do there. So I get caught and see this woman on the courts. I go up to her and go, "Excuse me, but I do not think this is a public place." I knew it was not, but I was being polite. She then goes, "Who are you?" "The police." Yeah, I was annoyed and quipped back, "No, actually, I am a child secret enforcer." And then I said again that it's not a public place, and she went, "I've been walking my dog here for 10 years, which was a lie, so go away and mind your own business. I was shocked, and me and the other person I was with went back chuckling as she was so horrible. We went to a teacher and explained. He went up to her and explained to her that this was not a public place, and then she started acting all innocent and apologetic, and I was angry. People in society think that children are not their equals and do not respect them. These stories are something else. Posted by user -alula. Titled, Entitled parent thinks I'm lucky to be invited to my family party. Each year, my parents rent a big summer house for a family weekend. During the early years of this tradition, we would alternate between my father's and my mother's side of the family, as both sides counted around 45 plus persons, which is the capacity of the house. After the first few years, my dad's family stopped coming since they lived far and most of them don't get along with each other. My mum's family was happy to come every year instead, and my dad decided to invite a few of his cousins who still wanted to be there. I was there every year since I like it so much. People would often ask me where they could set their things or find something, as it was well known that my parents organized the whole thing. About 5 years ago, my dad's cousin brought his new girlfriend. He went through a tough divorce the year prior and was depressive for most of it. We were all happy to see him with someone, and his mental health had improved a lot. Now, while his girlfriend isn't your typical Karen, it didn't take me long to realize I did not enjoy talking to her. She has this way of expressing herself that leaves no doubt that she thinks she and her kids are better than any other people, and often give constructive comments or advice even when nobody asked. Overall, she's got this sickly sweet and condescending vibe going on. From now on, we'll refer to this woman as Becky. I decided to just steer clear of her for the weekend. She mostly sticked with my dad's cousin and the few members of my dad's family, as she already knew them. This includes my half-siblings, whom have my dad's surname, while my sister and I have my mum's. However, we think of each other as siblings. On the second day of our stay, Becky cornered me while we went for a walk, and the following conversation ensued. She says, "It's a really nice place. How many years was this family reunion organized?" "I think it's the 5th year. It's a really nice place." "Wow, you're lucky to be invited." I was confused by this comment since my parents organized, so I don't see why I wouldn't be invited. She must have seen my confusion and continued, "Well, since your dad's side of the family organizes the event..." Actually, the event is organized by both my parents, so I am here each year. "Oh, I just meant that it's nice of your father's family to be so welcoming with your mum's." The way she said it implied that we were lucky and should thank her boyfriend, and to a certain extent herself, for being there. Got me a bit mad, since it was the first year she was present, and it was the first time I ever met her. Besides, this year is actually my mum's side of the family. My dad decided to invite his cousins since they enjoy it so much here, so I guess you guys are lucky to be invited this year. I changed pace so I wouldn't be walking alongside her anymore. I saw her talk with my dad's cousin while looking in my direction. He must have told her that I wasn't lying, since she looked kind of flustered and diverted my eyes. The rest of my weekend was Becky-free, and it was awesome. TLDR, the new girlfriend of my dad's cousin tells me I'm lucky to be invited to my father's family gathering. Turns out, this is my mother's family event, and she's the guest. Yeah, suck it, Becky. Posted by user Wafer2016, titled, Neighbor calls the SPCA on us twice. So, my doggo is part bear dog, double coat. She's also really pretty. She has the long curly coat of a duck trawler and the colouring and double coat of a bear dog. One day last summer, we let her out to do her business. We have a fully fenced yard completely shaded with ancient trees, and she had a bowl of cool water. Honestly, she was having such a great time out there that we forgot to let her back in before we went to church. But my brother was home, so it was no big deal, right? Apparently not. Our dog is a rescue, and like most rescues, she has separation anxiety. So when she saw us pull out of the driveway, she started to cry. After about 20 minutes or so, my brother let her back in, and all was fine. Nope! SPCA came knocking on our door. Two very nice officers who explained that a concerned neighbor called, saying we left our doggo outside for hours on end in the heat. I explained that never ever happened due to her extreme separation anxiety. They had a look at her, saw a well-fed, well-groomed dog. Okay, a little too well-fed, okay, fine. She's spoiled rotten and has the cookie belly to prove it. They have a look at her yard and said it was one of the nicest setups they saw in a long time. Our only fault was we were late in getting her registered with the city, which, given she was only recently adopted, they forgave and reminded us to make sure we did it. Fast forward 5 months later. It's nearly Christmas, it's Canada, there is snow on the ground, and our good doggo is loving it. She has a huge yard full of snow all to herself to run and dig and poop in. She was in heaven. Sadly, she still got scared if she couldn't see her people when she felt she needed to, so one day, after about 15 minutes of snow time, she came to the door off our deck to be let in. I was busy, so it took me about 5 minutes to let her in. 5 minutes. She's a bear dog. Yeah, it's Canada. Yeah, it's cold, but she's a bear dog. They use them to pull fudging sleds in Alaska. 2 days later, same SPCA officers came knocking at our door. Same neighbor complained. This time, we were leaving our dog out in the cold. She insisted the SPCA take our doggo away because we were being so mean to her. Once again, the officers checked the spoiled rotten pooch, noted her full balls, rather furry spot on the couch, toys on the floor, and her double coat, for insulation from the cold and heat. Once again, they checked our yard, noted the happy rompy tracks in the snow from a good dog having a blast playing. Now, I have to say they were both really nice, but after the second unnecessary call to our house, I could tell they were ticked. I said, look, I know you can't tell me which neighbor it was, and that's fine, but one call, okay, fine, maybe they were honestly concerned. I appreciate that, but first they complain we're leaving her in the heat, now they complain we're leaving her in the cold. She's a frickin' bear dog. When the hell is she supposed to poop? They laughed and agreed and promised to speak to the neighbor and officially tell them to shut the frick up. Only more professionally. We never found out who it was that called, but honestly, I am of the mind that they were hoping to get our girl taken away from us so they could adopt her themselves. She's a really beautiful doggo. Dog tax. She is looking royal. Posted by user Maximum Weight 0. Titled, Guy sues restaurant, then believes he owns it. Mini story times. There's this guy who comes in like every Saturday and Sunday morning and just waltzes right in and sits himself right down at the same table every time. Mind you, the place he sits himself at is a place with no server, so someone has to pick up his table. It's so annoying. He is the most infuriating person I've ever met because he sued the restaurant because his coffee was too hot and he burned himself. I'm not kidding. And so now he believes that he can boss everyone around and do whatever he wants. There's this other regular who comes in frequently and just sits himself down wherever he wants, and the servers are okay with it because he leaves a good tip. But sometimes he'll just walk into the kitchen and talk to the managers and servers. And I know I'm just ranting at this point, but it is so frustrating to see people who feel so entitled that they can do whatever they want at a restaurant. There is this other couple who are regulars, who are the nicest people, and I enjoy talking to them. But just because you are regular doesn't mean I'm going to bump your name to the top of the list and seat you first. So the other day, we were on like a 30-minute wait time, and I told him that, and he was like, "Seriously? There's nothing you can do to bump my name to the top?" And I just flat out said no. Anyway, long story short, just because you come in frequently and give us your business doesn't mean you're entitled enough to boss us around and treat restaurant staff like your servants. Posted by user Gargoyle Gunners, titled, "Entitled Woman Follows My Brother to Prove a Point." Some info. This happened a bit after Hurricane Irma hit, so we had no electricity for some time. Me and my family were staying at my step-aunt's house during the story. Plus, this story is short, so don't expect much. I don't do anything other than watch in this story. Also, this was made on mobile, so sorry for poor formatting. OP is me, B is brother, SA is step-aunt, EW is entitled woman. So the place step-aunt lives has a public pool that needs a card to open the gate, but there was no electricity, so we only had to go in. Brother brought a scooter that step-aunt's daughter let him use. We just played around in the pool, and brother drove the scooter around the pool. He was 11 and I was 10, but we know now that that was probably a bad idea. Then entitled woman comes out of nowhere and saw brother driving the scooter and instantly looked at step-aunt and said, "Hi, are those your kids?" "No, but I'm their aunt." "Well, brother shouldn't be using that scooter here." "Yeah, but he knows not to go near the pool." "Still, he shouldn't be using that here." Mind you, we were the only ones there. I don't remember what they said after this, but they argued for a while and then we left. Plus, she probably wasn't even there to swim or be in the shade and relax because she was fully clothed. Brother said that he was going to go ride a scooter outside for a bit, so I went with him and we took turns going back and forth around the sidewalk until we saw entitled woman coming towards the house, and she asked to bring out step-aunt. We did what she told us and they both started talking, and step-aunt asks how she found where we lived, and she said, "I saw bro and followed him here." Step-aunt to brother, "Did you see her following you?" Brother shakes his head, "No." "So why did you follow brother and come here?" "I just want you to know that B shouldn't use the scooter at the pool." "So you followed a child just to prove a point." "Well, I wouldn't put it that way. It's more like informing you." "Well, you didn't have to follow a kid just to tell me that. You already told me at the pool." "Yeah, but you looked like you weren't listening." And that was the last I heard until me and brother just went inside. Silence me for years? Enjoy losing all of your friends. So, some backstory. My freshman year of high school, I was sexually assaulted by a peer, and so was another girl. I kept it to myself because we had a lot of mutual friends, and I didn't want them to be uncomfortable, or feel like they had to choose a side. I also felt like I was responsible, and it made me feel really guilty. I also suffered a lot of psychological repercussions, an eating disorder, and I began cutting. I developed severe anxiety and depression. Finally, it peaked, and I forced myself to tell my English teacher. The police were called, I was interviewed. Already, I could tell the detective was not taking me seriously. He also blatantly misquoted in the statement and used words like misunderstanding and he went in for a kiss. Even though I made it very clear I struggled and tried to push him away, and he had me pinned to the wall with his hand around my throat. He confessed after 10 minutes of being interviewed by the police. The charges got dropped by the prosecutor because he felt that the case would never go to trial. He was a star student and was very well respected. After this, he was banned from speaking at school-sanctioned events. I was still quiet because I'm not a rock-the-boat type person. Eventually, I found out he was planning on going to the same college I was going to. I wrote him a letter asking him to please reconsider. He said he was very sorry earlier. I told him in the letter to put his money where his mouth is and prove it. He never replied. A few weeks later, I found out he's planning to speak at a baccalaureate event put on by a local interfaith community. I emailed the teacher in charge and told her what happened and politely asked her not to allow him to speak. She emailed back and essentially said that that's terrible, I'm so sorry, we're still going to let him speak though, feel better. I'm livid at this point. I've been dismissed, belittled, ignored and unheard for years despite my efforts to get justice. He's still incredibly popular and everyone loves him. I decide I've done all I can. I tried to take care of things on the down low, talk to him privately to come to an agreement, talk to the organizer to try to come to an agreement, and they both ignored me just like the police did. So I decide I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I attend the baccalaureate event, and while he's giving his speech, ironically about treating others with respect, lol, I hold up a sign that says, "Redacted, has assaulted 2 women. Is this the face of class of 2020? Stop giving assaulters and abusers a platform to speak. Stop silencing women." By the time the event is over, everyone is talking about it, and everyone has ticked at both him and the organizers for letting him speak. Many of the girls there are victims of sexual assault themselves, and they are all furious that the organization knowingly let a predator speak. I feel incredible. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The last thing he told me after he'd finished violating me was, "Don't tell anyone." And even after years had passed, and I felt comfortable speaking about it to a select few, and the police knew, and all the teachers knew, he was still praised. And every time I heard someone talk about him fondly, I heard that little voice from deep inside me saying, "You're letting him win." Now that everyone knows, and everyone hates him, I know that finally, I can lay this matter to bed. I can finally let go. So there's a few edits here. This first one is talking about the gold and that they just like to make a blanket statement to all sexual assault victims in my DMs and on the comments of this post. You are enough, you are loved. And even though the system is rigged against us, I hear you. I am listening. You don't need to hold up a sign to get your revenge. Sometimes taking care of yourself and moving on is enough. Trust me, I know it's easier said than done, but just know that I'm on your side. I'm in your corner. I see you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need to talk. I love you. Edit 3. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for all of your well wishes. I love all of you so much. You are so sweet. I would like to address a few things. I've gotten a lot of direct messages as well as comments on this post from survivors of sexual assault telling me how brave I am and how I'm their hero. I appreciate that so much. You have no idea how happy that makes my heart, but I have something to say to all of you who said that. Yes, it was scary and hard to hold the sign up. I'm not saying that it wasn't a brave thing to do. It was, and I'm proud of myself. However, I don't like what that implies. I don't like the implication that a survivor who is not yet ready to share their story, choosing to keep it private, is in any way an act of cowardice. My friends, you're all brave. You are brave just for waking up in the morning. You're brave for going to work. You are brave for making yourself dinner and letting yourself enjoy it. You have nothing to be ashamed of. That I can assure you. You are perfectly enough, and you have nothing to prove. You do not have to earn your place in this world with acts of courage. You do not have to prove to the masses that you deserve to be alive, that you deserve to be happy. Just know that for yourself, because it's true. How could it possibly be anything but true? How could you possibly be anything less than perfect? You are kind, you are compassionate, you are strong, you are resilient, you are intelligent, you are brave. Be your own hero, my friends. I love you all. I hope those kind words help some people, even though it's not particularly r/pro revenge, it still needs to be said. Posted by user Take Me to the Dumpster, titled, "Restaurant Scams Me for Fake Google Reviews. I burn their Google Reviews page and reputation to the ground and get the media to cover it." Hi folks, first post here, thought it would definitely fit. So about a month ago, I applied for a sushi restaurant called Yoshi's, and I got a text from their hiring manager, and we chatted about my availability, location, start date, yada yada. She then asked me to write a review of general Japanese food to show I knew what I was talking about, and could upsell customers. Fine, I write a long review and sent it to her. She then sends me a tiny link URL and tells me to post it there before I would be invited for an interview. I click it, and what do you know? It's the Google page for a whole different restaurant all the way across the country. So I read the reviews, and they had done this to 30 or so people in the last 2 weeks, at the different locations franchised to the same crazy owner. I was ticked, to say the least. This happened peak COVID in my state. People are unemployed at staggering rates, struggling to feed their families, and these a-holes are scamming potential hires for fake reviews. Being unemployed, I had some time on my hands, so I screenshotted our convo and posted it all over social media. They went from 3.4 to 1.2 in a few hours, with more than 70 new reviews about their crappy behavior. I was satisfied with that, and a report to the Attorney General here. But then I noticed the owner had managed to get all of the reviews removed. So at that point, I went full nuclear. I contacted every media outlet, reported them to every oversight board, emailed corporate about it, and reported them to Google. I managed to get one of our local news outlets to cover it, and Google ended up removing all of their reviews altogether. Scam me and countless others during a global pandemic? I ruin your business's reputation for your crappy behavior. Posted by user GTC Infinite, titled, "My dad had an affair with his best friend for life's wife." So my dad had an affair with his BFF's wife. Let's call her Jane. She claimed she was pretty much in love with my father, and of course her husband didn't know. I found out because once I got a Facebook message from a fake account telling me that my father was banging his BFF's wife. I actually didn't care. My parents are divorced since 2005. The problem was that someone unknown was sending my mother text messages, telling her to leave my father alone and many offensive things. We let it slide for a while, but then those anonymous text messages became a daily thing. We confronted my dad, and he confessed that he was sleeping with Jane, but he said she was not the one sending the messages. He said he was sure because Jane's husband was also getting those messages. My dad was practically blinded by her manipulations, and my mum and I had a really strong hunch that it was her. My dad got so mad after we suggested it that he stopped speaking to me and my mum for a while. I also got mad, but much more offended, because he would still not believe me. I mean, I had no reason to lie to him. Still, I let all that slide. But then, I got another anonymous message offending me, telling me I was just like my mother, and that's why my boyfriend had dumped me, and that we would be alone for the rest of our lives, and things like that. Then, I got really mad. I went to the cyber police, which is a thing where I'm from, okay? And they tracked the source of the anonymous message. It turns out that it was her, and she was also sending her husband messages because she was so desperate for the truth to come out so she could be with my father. Although I think that just confronting her husband would have been better. What she really wanted was to distance my father from me and my mum. She was messing with my family, so I decided to mess with hers, and sent the proof to her husband and her sons that she was behind the anonymous messages, and that she was, in fact, sleeping with my dad. I also showed my dad the proof and exposed her on Facebook. She was a saleswoman, so it did affect her. Her sons and her husband were so mad at her, she had to move out of her house, and my dad broke up with her as well. She was left alone, but I feel like that's what she deserved. Posted by user Arizona Avenue, titled, "Revenge on Evil Landlord." When I was in university, I'd hear stories about horrible landlords of students' housing, but hadn't experienced it myself. Until third year, when it felt like we got 3 years' worth of crappy landlords all in one go. It began when I heard noises in the wall behind my bed at night. I brushed it off for a while until I realized that it was an animal in the wall. I told the landlords the next day, and they immediately played dumb, acting as if I was stupid in front of my housemates for suggesting that something could fit inside of a wall. That was the first alarm bell. Why immediately try to embarrass me into dropping it? After explaining that I know what a cavity wall is, she asked if we'd seen anything in the kitchen. Oddly specific, we didn't think about it until later. From then on, her husband dealt with us. We weren't aware that he was our landlord too. A little time passes, still nothing done about the noise in my wall. Not that it was a surprise. I'd worked out by then that it was probably something like a mouse, and that it could run through the terrace of houses as long as it didn't chew its way through my wall or die in there. I put the whole thing on the back burner. Until we were all sat in the living room and we heard a thud in the kitchen, then squeaking. There was a giant rat in our kitchen. The rat disappeared into a hole in the completely crumbling kitchen wall, and the landlord claimed that we made it up and that they'd never had a rodent problem. I contacted the previous tenants through Facebooking names that I found on letters for them that had been posted to us by mistake. The property had had a rat problem for the last 3 years before we moved in at least. I set up a rat trap and caught one, took photos and sent them to the landlord to tell him to sort the problem out. He told us that because there was a line in our contract about the landlord not paying for pest control, the contract specified wasp nests, etc. We didn't even think about rats when we signed it, that we'd have to pay the hundreds of pounds to fix it. He had knowingly written that into our contract so he wouldn't have to pay out, instead of fixing the kitchen wall and the exterior wall where the rats were getting in. To cut the rest of the setting the scene part of the story short, we called the council, who sent a pest control team. While on their visit, one of the men took my housemate to one side and told her that our landlord is evil and he is known for getting nasty. They told him that it wasn't our fault that there were rats, it was his, and he screamed into my face until he was bright red about how I was a terrible person and was trying to take him down for no reason. One of my housemates had to leave because she was scared. I wasn't. We were in a room full of men who were backing us up, making himself look worse for screaming in my face like that. I'm female and was 22 at the time, about half his size. He tried to sue us for slander. It isn't slander if it's true. So, swing and a miss, buddy. Now for the revenge. It was written into our contract that we had to be notified 24 hours in advance if anyone needed access to the house, which included house viewings. I began my mission: stop any other student from getting stuck in this hellhole. The house was being shown by agents, so it made it fairly easy. I left the rat traps in prominent places, casually explaining why we needed them if asked, and if I felt I was being too subtle, making a show of, "Oh gosh, please ignore the rat traps. The landlord said he'd fix the kitchen wall where they get in, but hasn't gotten around to it, so we have to catch them." I was honest about the mold problem in the bathroom. When I found out they were planning on increasing rent by £100 a month, I made a point of saying something like, "Well, it's just about worth the rent I'm paying." I made sure to say his name so they wouldn't get away with using his wife's name as a front while his reputation for aggression stayed hidden. The agents never said anything directly to me, and because we had to be notified, I could always make sure I was home when there was a viewing. My housemates fully supported my revenge, but I was the woman of action in the house. When I'm sure I'm in the right, I will do what's necessary to make things right. That was until they tried to turn up unannounced one day. Not even knocking, just unlocked our front door and walked in. Luckily, I was in the house and kicked them out for not informing us, and told them that they were in breach of our contract. If the crappy landlord could use it to beat us with, two can play at that game. No new tenants had signed for the house by the time we were free of that hellhole. It's been 2 years now though, so I have no idea what happened to the rat house. Posted by user Reggie1, titled, "Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me." I've never really posted anything before, but I have a funny revenge and karma story that my friends have always enjoyed. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, the RA at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm's leader's name was Julio, fake name by the way, and at first he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. We talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader, and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol in his freshman years in the dorms. He gave off the impression that he didn't really care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major, taking some pretty tough classes, and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took one shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, haha, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen show up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02 to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting crap-faced freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few days later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol, instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with, "You made a decision and have to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I've never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out, Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest and funniest thing I've ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a crap load of trouble. So, I sent the text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio, and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall, and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one who ratted him to Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how crappy his life has been since he got fired. After going through this entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired, and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." I can imagine what kind of guy Julio is. He's not really popular, so he's trying hard to look cool using his seniority and position. His stories about him drinking as a freshman was one of his ways to make him look cool. It could have been a true story, but it's just probably him drinking alone and no one knows. The fact that he ratted people for drinking and used the term dealing alcohol really shows that he's not a popular guy. Probably just a loser who wants to look cool in front of his underclassmen. Oh, everyone thought Julio sucked. He would make these outrageous stories and try to pass them off as true. One time, he made up this wild story about how he was engaged in his senior year of high school and his fiancée cheated on him and got pregnant from another guy. Turns out he was openly gay in high school and went back in the closet when he went to college. Also, he always told this story about how he was once offered a full ride to Princeton but turned it down. The other dorm leader in the hall was actually a pretty cool dude, and basically let everyone know that Julio was a pathological liar. Posted by user MikeRoo7, titled, "Half the class fails the midterm after cheater copies me." I don't have a problem helping classmates. I really don't. I even tutored several classmates during my final semester of undergrad because they needed the help. They all ended up passing their classes with my assistance. This story comes from a particularly tough business information systems class during my undergraduate education. The students in this class were mostly non-technical business majors, so this new material wasn't at all similar to anything we'd learned in other classes. Needless to say, most of the students were struggling, including me. I still had a 4.0 in college at this point, though I finished with a 3.99, and I was willing to put in max effort to keep my stellar GPA. I started studying hard. I made my own Quizlet sets, I read the book every night, I finished assignments a week early, and I did outside research. After grinding it out in this class for about a month, I was working on assignments in a room designated for quiet homework time, and that's where our story begins. Several other students from my class were there and working on the same assignment I was on. Judging by the size of exasperation, the irritated whispers and requests for help, they weren't having much success. Having studied relentlessly for a month, I was having an easier time of it. As I got up to go get some water from the fountain in the hall, a classmate asked for my help. I told him I could do that and I'd be right back. I returned a few minutes later to find what I can only describe as a bunch of busy bees happily working away. This was strange since they were hopelessly stuck 2 minutes before that, but whatever. My classmate tells me he figured it out without me. Now, I'm not an idiot, so I know the 5 people in this room probably copied my work off my computer when I went to get water. Scumbag move number 1. But as it turns out, no one in the class needed help the next day or the day after. Whoever in the study room had stolen my work had forwarded it to most of the class. Scumbag move number 2. I don't mind being helpful, but I hate being used. So I made a plan to get back at the people who had stolen my work. It didn't take long to organize my plan to carry it out. Here is how it went. 1. I changed an answer on the next assignment by multiplying by -1. $1,500 became -$1,500 on this question. 2. The next week, I left my computer in the same place as before, and went to get water, just like I had done the week before. 75% of the people in my class of 40 people put -$1,500 as the answer to question 3, which was definitely incorrect. 3. I began studying relentlessly for the midterm. Our professor had said that he wouldn't adjust the weight of the test, something like your score divided by 50 on a test with 60 points available, so the score of 40 becomes 80% instead of 67%. If anyone scored particularly well, that is. This class was difficult, and no one was expecting anyone to score over 75%. So all of my classmates figured the weight of the test would be adjusted. My plan was to wreck the curve, even though it's not a curve, and deny everyone the adjusted weight by producing a sufficiently high score. 4. I recruited a classmate who hadn't stolen my work to study with. Together, we aimed to score high enough that our professor couldn't adjust the weight of the midterm. Here is how it all played out. No one who copied me realized the answer was incorrect. Every last one of those idiots submitted the wrong answer to question 3. This next part surprised me, but my classmates began insisting the class was unfair, too difficult, or rigged, and launched these complaints at our professor. One day, after class, I had the following exchange since I was the last student out of the classroom. Professor says, "Obi, do you think this class is too hard?" Honestly, this class is hard, but if people spent as much time studying as they did complaining, they would be fine. They really just need to get to work. I thought the same. Me? deciding spur of the moment my next move. I also happen to know that most of the class incorrectly copied my work on the last assignment. Question 3 should be a net income of $1,500, not a net loss of $1,500. I put down the wrong answer initially, everyone copied me, and then I changed the answer late. I think you can reasonably conclude that anyone with negative $1,500 as the answer cheated off my incorrect work. I figured they all copied, but I didn't know you were the source. Anyway, thanks for your candor and your dedication to the class. I didn't cheat, so I don't know what happened to those who did. But depending on the class, they would get either a 0 for their assignment or a plagiarism citation, so they got one of those. Fast forward to test day, and I'm ready to go. I know since most of the students are business majors, they need 70% to pass the class because it's a required course. Hurting them on the midterm will go a long way in helping drop their grades. I take the test, I'm the first one done, and I leave pretty sure that I've done enough to deny the class exam weight adjustment. A week later, we get our exams back. Tests are distributed all around me with scores on the top in red ink. 68, 71, 70, 66, 75, 67. And these are the smart students. Someone on the end of my row takes a test from our professor and lets out a sigh as he begins passing a test down my row. It stops on my desk. 93%. I've won. Some idiot in the front of the class says, "So is there going to be a curve?" Nope. What was the high score? 93%. Average score for the exam was 71, so a good number of people didn't get a passing score. Maybe they made up for it on the final and passed, but I don't care. I got mine. TLDR, people steal my homework, so I bait them into giving a wrong answer, tip the professor off on their cheating, and score high enough on the midterm to deny anyone a chance for an adjusted score. I'm sorry, who are you? Context. I've, 20 female, been bullied all my life, and have been in recovery for a multitude of things for the past year or so. I go to university in the same city I grew up in, so there's a high chance of me coming across people that went to previous schools, or who hurt and bullied me. I was well known for being bad-tempered and easy to wind up when I was younger. What happened? I was in the pharmacy, waiting to pick up my prescription, when someone shouted something at me. I pretended to not hear them, and they shouted again. They ended up getting frustrated and tugging on my arm. I twisted around and immediately recognized who it was. A guy, 20 male, who had bullied me for over 10 years. So rather than get angry, I thought I would mess with him and see what happens. He says, "Hi, heard you were in local uni." I say I'm sorry, but I don't know who you are. Do I know you from somewhere? Immediately, he deflated, and it was glorious to see. I had to stop myself from smiling. He says, "It's me, his name, from school. Come on, you know me." Me, with a confused face, acting 100, says, "I'm really sorry, but I don't know you. Did we go swimming together, perhaps?" "No, I don't think so." "Well, I'm really sorry, but I just don't know who you are. I think you should go to the back of the line, sir." I went on my phone and just blocked him out. He looked lost and eventually went to the back of the line. I got my prescription, ignored him, and went to my car and drove off. I literally screamed for joy, and also because I was about to break down. It was a wonderful feeling to see him like that, and to feel like he had nothing against me. To make him feel like he hadn't had a large effect on my life. Edit. I'm amazed so many people read this, seeing as I wrote this in 5 minutes in an Asda car park. To the people who think he was about to be nice or that I bullied him, I have to disagree. He was never nice to me, and would love to pretend to be nice and then pull the rug. Nothing I could do would be half as worse as what he's done to me. I don't owe him anything. Hi, again, edit. Thank you all for the love and the awards. It means a lot. And I just want to clarify that he didn't shout my name but said, "Oi, Ginger," and that he was probably going to make fun of the fact that I'm going to the local uni and not a better one. Ooh, that's a spicy detail left out. What a dick. Posted by user Toasty Pony, titled, "Keep taking things out of my cubicle? Now you're gonna get sick too." This was pre-pandemic, but I'm kind of a germaphobe anyway. I work in a warehouse, and the leadership team uses radios to communicate. Not only did everyone make fun of me for always sanitizing everything in my cubicle at the end of the night, but one manager in particular would always steal my pens and radio. He came in about 2 or 3 hours before me and was always too lazy to walk to his office to get his own. I used the label printer to put my name on it, started using really girly colored pens, and even locked my stuff up at the end of the night to no avail. Every day I would come in, my desk drawer would be broken into. Filing cabinet type, so if you really talked it enough you could break it open. And he thought it was some big joke. Made worse by the fact that I would Lysol everything once I hunted him down and got it back, because mother frickin' never washed his hands either. Well, one day I came down with some sort of flu/cold, and suffered through the workday, but this time purposefully didn't sanitize anything at the end of the day. Guess who came in feeling like dog crap a couple days later? Wash your hands and keep them off my crap. Posted by user Rusty the Maker, titled, "Force me to eat something you know I cannot digest? Get ready for a nasty surprise." When I was 8 years old, I started having awful digestive issues and lactose intolerance. I mean, sick out of both ends kind of digestive issues, sensitivity to food, etc. At that age, I knew that there were simply certain foods I had to avoid. My mum didn't really believe me, but also didn't care what I did. My dad, however, decided that I must eat whatever he puts in front of me. He either didn't believe me or got some sick pleasure from forcing me to eat things that made me sick. Well, Greek yogurt was something that I absolutely could not tolerate. Just the smell of it would make me ill. Now my dad liked to make smoothies in this fancy blender that we had, and he would often give me these for breakfast. Usually no problem. Well, I saw he had bought some Greek yogurt for some diet that he was on at the time. I said to him, "Hey Dad, please do not put Greek yogurt in those smoothies you make me. I cannot eat it. It will make me sick." He says, "Bullcrap, there's nothing wrong with your stomach." 2 days later, he makes me a smoothie that he tells me is pineapple. As a kid, pineapple was my favorite thing. He sits down, watching me drink it. As soon as it hit my tongue, I knew the idiot had put Greek yogurt in it. Immediately, I feel the beast in my stomach awaken. I hold back and ask, forcing my vomit down, "Dad, what is this?" He looks surprised, but his smugness returns within seconds. "Oh, pineapple, a couple frozen bananas, some orange soda, a little Greek yogurt," and I proceed to look him in the eye and projectile vomit about a quart of nastiness on him, and all over the bathrobe he was wearing. Checkmate, a-hole. Posted by user Yardash, titled, "More Shopping One-Way Aisle Shenanigans." Saw another post that reminded me of how petty I can be when cranky. I was in the shop the other day, and here, for whatever reason, folks can't understand the concept of one-way aisles and following arrows. Personally, I think it makes shopping much more efficient overall, not having to squeeze by folks, but that's another thing. Heading up the baking aisle in my fruitless attempt to find yeast, I'm standing there, looking at the once again empty shelf, when I notice Karen. Like the stereotypical Karen. She could be placed in the dictionary as the go-to example of Karen, coming down the aisle from the wrong direction. Well, I was in a bad mood. Had a rough day at work, so I casually took one step towards the middle of the aisle, conveniently right next to one of the one-way only arrows on the floor, and proceed to take my sweet time looking at the adjacent flowers. Well, of course, Karen gets to me and I hear a big Apparently using big girl words was too much. I ignore and continue my examination of the flowers. Another loud the sound only a true Karen could make. So I turn to face her and stare at her for 5 seconds of silence, look down at the one-way sticker that I was standing next to for another good 5 seconds, followed up with 5 more seconds of Karen stare, and went back to the flowers. This was met with some choice words that, being a gentleman, I shan't repeat, but defeated Karen turned her cart around and sulked away. Sadly, that filled up my Yardash can be a dick to strangers quota for the month, if not year, but it was worth it. Posted by user Malé Michel, titled, "We don't share alcohol in this house." This story takes place a few years back when I came home from university for Christmas holidays to visit my family. I was of legal drinking age at the time as well. To set the scene, it's just my mum and I having dinner at the beginning of our time off. She pours herself a glass of wine from an average bottle. I'm not a wine snob, but she is. I ask for a glass as well to go with dinner, and she declines. Her exact words are, "Oh, we don't share alcohol in this house." Okay, not a problem. I didn't know this rule, and as I'm not a heavy drinker, I didn't see the issue with just having a glass out of her bottle. So, I go on off to the liquor store to grab myself a bottle of drink over the next few days, and lo and behold, I find her favorite bottle of wine. It's Burrowing Owls. The liquor store only has a case of it and limits the number of bottles you can buy. It's a rare find, and I lucked out. I buy the max, which is 2, and hid one, while I bring the second inside. By now, it's evening, and after dinner. My mum is in the living room finishing her wine. I open the bottle and bring both the bottle and glass to the living room. My mum eyes up the bottle and asks for a glass. I look her dead in the eyes and say, "Sorry, Mum, we don't share alcohol in this house." She offers me 2 of her bottles for mine, says I won't know the difference, but I stand firm. We don't share alcohol in this house. So, I force myself to finish the bottle in front of her while she sulks. Christmas morning, after my family has opened up all our gifts, I come out with the second bottle as a gift to my mum. She shared it with me that night. Posted by user Umbra Joke, titled, "You want to invade my space with your car while I wait for a tow truck? Hope you didn't have to rush off." This happened this afternoon. Today was balls hot, and between my car's AC not working and my body's habit of sweating puddles in anything over 70 degrees, my mood was already a bit thin. I was picking up some items from Home Depot and parked halfway in a quarter-full parking lot. Plenty of open spaces around. I haven't gone to the store much in the past few months, so while I was trying to remember the PPE order of operations, I absent-mindedly let my keys slip from my lap to the cup holder. I'm all kitted up and go to get my stuff from the lockers and head back to my car. I start patting my pockets and feel that little ball of fear rolling around the pit of my stomach. I started walking faster, and as I get to my car, I see my keys in the cup holder. I'm standing there, staring through the window while sweating buckets from a 3-minute walk, annoyed, but I contact roadside and get a truck dispatched quickly. As I'm leaning against the front of my car, a van comes down the lane on the opposite row and pulls into the spot right in front of my car. As the driver starts pulling closer to my legs, I shout, "Hold it," and put my hand out. She stops the van about 1.5 feet from me and looks pissy, like hitting me would have inconvenienced her plans for the day. I look around at the 9 other open spots all next to or behind her in the area and gesture towards them. She gestures at me and mouths, "Why?" I guess she was asking me why I'm just standing there, and despite it not being any of her damn business, I say I'm locked out of my car. She sits in her car for 5 minutes, just adding to the heat around me while I dig around on my phone. Eventually, she gets out, scowls at me, and goes inside. About 20 minutes after she went in, my tow truck shows up, but it's on the lane opposite me. I was feeling a bit petty, so I stopped the guy right behind the van, not thinking anything would come of it. Well, right as he goes to get the tools, van lady comes out of the store. She was lividly muttering to herself as she gets in her car and turns it on. I explain the basics of the situation, and he looks around at all the other still open spots in sheer confusion, when a crap-eating grin comes across his face. He starts opening the door, taking a few extra minutes to make sure he does it right, and then has me sit in his air-conditioned cab while he fills out an order form because his phone was acting up. The dude took probably an extra 10 minutes to do his job, while van lady is stewing in her annoyance. I appreciated the solidarity and threw him a few bucks for the service. He then made sure I got to leave first before rolling out. Dear tow truck guy, you rock. TLDR, van lady gets in my space with plenty of other choices, truck driver wastes her time. Edit, some quick answers. I lock my door by hitting the door lock button on the door upon exiting the car. I may start using the key to lock, but I hate that damn confirmation honk that the car gives. I didn't call a tow truck. I contacted my insurance, who contacted a tow company who had a driver dispatched with the door opening tools. In parking lots, there are usually 2 sets of parking spaces separated by a line. I was parked away from every other car. She decided to park in the space right in front of my car and was driving towards my legs. Not sure how much clearer I can make that. And edit 2, to everyone who commented it's possible to turn off the locking horn, you've just changed my life. Thank you. Posted by user Zakana, titled, I got fired. Employers' lawyers should have done their homework. I did. This happened to me about 20 years ago while in college. I am being deliberately vague because reasons. Background. I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 a.m. and every hour I checked over things, handled the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 p.m. person arrived. Most of the time, I read, watched TV, or played games on my laptop. I probably worked no more 10 minutes of every hour unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekday shifts when others were sick. One day, while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that the evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 p.m. that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 p.m., did the normal things, and then left at 12 a.m. when my relief arrived. It was a little more work, more call volumes, etc. Then, after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from a nice person to a total Karen. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time a system jammed up at a remote site and she called them. 5 hours later, I saw the jam was still there, so I called that site again to see if they were still working on it or if something else was wrong, because the woman on our end, who would be the one to help them, was leaving soon. They did have a problem, and so I hooked them up. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and not having to bother an upper-level employee at home on a Friday just after having left work? I got yelled at because Karen complained that I apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I had read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around Karen when needed, thankful for the fact I had only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did this stupid highlighting thing, and my log entries started getting more and more detailed, even referencing Karen's calls when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The firing. The following summer, just after I crossed year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back, after about a week, my boss came down after everyone had left and had me describe how I did a certain task which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyways, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason, and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws, such as race, religion, etc. I thought I was screwed, so I just started applying everywhere I could. During my job search, I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity, I read it and discovered that my employer had shot themselves in the foot. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. What this stated was that they would never lay us off and such if our jobs were eliminated. We would simply be retained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounds good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it. But their fancy, high-priced lawyers had missed something. In my state's law, the ones passed by the legislature, I was screwed because of at will. What they neglected was case law. the ones determined by courts. This site cited a case from the state Supreme Court that had ruled that a job security clause waived at will on the employer side, turning it into a just cause relationship. This means that they had to have a real reason to fire me. The revenge. With that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented. The date of the file, which they tried to use against me, is baked into the version 2. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, would, in reality, display the date of the file. I showed this by backdating my own copy by a year, using the update archive available from the vendor. Next, I showed her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor's site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one bothered to do it because the guy who had wrote it retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing, I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why was it not done on weekends or holidays? The vendor pushed out updates on those days too, as I showed my lawyer the one from Christmas morning. And why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and all the evidence I'd collected, they were forced to settle with me. So in the end, their fancy high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did. Thank you to the wonderful librarians I have known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. TLDR, I got fired by a large corporation and thought I had no recourse. Then I found out their lawyers missed something in my state's law and forced them to pay me. Edit 1. Obviously, the terms of settlement are confidential, and as far as I know, still in effect. It was a good portion of my salary, though. I did also get unemployment during this time as well. I never found out how the reaction went down, as the main corporate office that would have dealt with it was in another state, and I never had any contact with those people. I imagine a new handbook was issued before they cut my check, though I feel bad for those who remained. Karen's fate was sealed about a year later. I saw a Facebook post by a former co-worker mentioning that his job with them had ended, so I asked for details. The company experienced a huge loss in revenue. As a result, Karen lost her job as the site I had worked in was closed. Of about the 50 of us that worked in that office, only 10 or so were moved to another location. Thankfully, most of the ones I liked were old enough to retire. It did not take a genius to realize that my termination was simply a layoff disguised as a firing. Posted by user Small Potato, titled, Payback for My Horrible Roommate. After college, I accepted a job across the country and moved in with a vague acquaintance that I'd met a couple of times. It quickly became clear that we were not going to get along. He was incredibly rude and condescending, routinely making snide remarks about my intelligence since I had been in a sorority in college. He would instruct me on how to redo all my chores in his way, always insinuating that I just wasn't as smart as he was. This led to a few heated arguments, and we ended up basically avoiding each other. My room was in the basement, and he was on the second floor. Except for going in and out, I stayed in the basement to avoid him. One night, I returned home, and my cat was missing. He is a huge fatty and never misses a meal, so I was immediately worried. I texted the roommate to see if he had let him out by mistake. He ignored me. I looked everywhere in my room and in the common areas. No cat. I could hear that he was home, so I texted again, asking if he could please check his room or just let me know if the cat got out by mistake. Again, no response. I couldn't search the neighborhood much after dark since we were in a pretty rough area, so I stayed up all night making flyers and online posts. I called animal control and my parents and broadly had a massive mental breakdown. I'm gonna guess that means briefly had a massive mental breakdown. I figured the most likely scenario was that he had escaped and wandered into the road. Early the next morning, Saturday, I looked all over our neighborhood. Losing hope, I returned back home. Right before I went back down to my half of the house, I heard a faint, distressed yowl. I followed the noise upstairs and realized it was coming from horrible roommate's locked bedroom. I phoned him repeatedly and waited several hours for him to come home, unlock his door, and let my poor cat out of his closet. No explanation was given, and this cat being an OG fatty and also a jerk, there is no way he silently slept all night. Simply put, there was no way this could have been an accident. At this point, we had a 1 month left on the lease, and I was able to make arrangements to stay with family for that final month. Interestingly enough, our internet service was in my name. I paid the final month in full and loaded my stuff into a U-Haul. I gleefully unplugged and returned our rented router, and OG Fatty Cat and I left town a month early. Wouldn't you know it, later that night, my phone starts blowing up with texts and calls. This man is looking for his missing internet. Somehow, I couldn't be bothered to respond. Posted by user Sonia Says, titled, "My roommate stopped paying me utilities, so I got told to come here from a different sub, so here I am. My roommate stopped paying for utilities and rent, so this happened back in my college days. I moved in with a friend from university. She was nice enough, but she definitely had financial issues, which I didn't know about before moving in together. Our apartment complex had us sign separate lease agreements because I guess they had too many situations with one person not paying, which made sense. So I was never liable for her part of the rent, but the utilities had to go in someone's name, and I was the chosen one. Think electricity, cable, internet. Things got a bit rough for her, and she was quote-unquote having trouble paying me for half of the utilities, which I was okay with and just covered it, until one day I hear her talking to some friends on the phone about their fancy spring break trip to the Caribbean and Florida. What the hell, man? You can't pay me, but you can afford to go on vacation and drive a new car. No bueno. I locked her out of the internet. I'm pretty good with computers and things, so I even kept her boyfriend's phone on the Wi-Fi, but locked her devices out of it. And just played dumb. I even got a new router. She spent hours on the phone with the internet people. She got a new phone, which I allowed to work for a few days and then shut out again. Then comes the TV. Parental supervision is great. I knew all the shows she liked to watch and blacklisted them. I barely watched TV anyway, so I didn't care. At some point, I'm talking to the apartment people, and I find out she isn't paying rent either. Again, what the hell? Not cool. Even though it's not my problem, I make it my problem. We had sub-panels for electricity in each apartment, so I screwed with her by randomly turning breakers on and off. She couldn't understand why her hairdryer would work one day and not the next. I just flick a breaker while she was showering. I convinced her that maybe her dryer was too strong for the electrical in the apartment and it was tripping it. So she bought a new fancy hairdryer. She was actually an idiot and bought one that had a higher electrical draw than the first. So I explained that to her and she bought a third one. I kept this crap up until the day we moved out. I never saw a cent from her, but man, it was worth it. ETA from other comments on the other sub, yes, I did talk to her prior to being controlling. She continually could not pay me, but would come home with high-end clothes or bags, expensive food, makeup, etc. Posted by user HikeSav, titled, "Use my Netflix account for free? Have an ugly profile pic." Okay, so this is a truly very small victory. So I got the highest tier of Netflix account, so I have the option to have 5 profiles. I have one for me, one for the kids, one for my wife, one as a joint profile for me and my wife, and the last one is for guests, basically freeloaders. One of the things you can do with Netflix is change the avatar of each profile, which I did for each account while leaving the guest account one of the defaults. My sister-in-law, crazy, rude, violent, just a really bad person, got permission from my wife to use the guest account. which I didn't mind as long as she only uses the guest account so she doesn't mess up my viewing stats, and she understands she shares the account with more people. One day, I've noticed that she changed the profile picture of the guest account to some actress from some show she was watching, and for some reason it really annoyed me. So like the mature adult that I am, I've changed the profile picture to some ugly creature from some other show. Such a stupid little victory. If you're going to use my account for free, you will use the ugly profile. Every few weeks she will try to change the pic again, so I know she cares, but I will quickly notice and change it to something even uglier. The last one was the Demogorgon from the Stranger Things. It's really petty and small, but it's fun to imagine her frustration to have to choose some ugly creature as the account she uses. Handicapped parking is for handicapped people, not rich ones. First, just an FYI, in most handicapped parking spots, there's a place next to the parking spot marked off for loading and unloading wheelchairs. In the US, it's usually painted with diagonal stripes. On to the story. My son and I were at Walmart, and as I parked, I saw that a new BMW convertible owner decided that the striped spot was set aside for him. I looked, and there was no sign of a placard or handicapped tag. Ticked me off, and I stewed about it the whole time we were shopping. When he was still parked there when I came out, I decided to get spiteful. I found a piece of paper and left a note on his windshield. It said, "So sorry, I did not mean to scrape your car with my wheelchair. I would leave my contact info, but you were illegally parked, blocking my van. So good luck buffing that out." We sat in the car another 20 minutes and waited. Out came this guy that looked like a personal trainer. He came jogging up to his car, chatting on his phone. He saw the note, screamed, "Oh crap!" Then he spent the next 20 minutes going over his car inch by inch, rubbing every speck of dust or dirt. He was still looking when we left. Nothing harmed, no damage, just a lesson hopefully learned. Posted by user Burning Spear RTP, titled, "You want to steal my mail? I'll give you some mail to steal." This happened a few years back. I was going through a nasty divorce, custody fights, crazy legal bills, having my reputation dragged through the mud, etc. I'll spare you the usual details, but my wife was really into making my life hell for no reason other than not putting up with her abuse anymore. Anyway, I noticed my mail started disappearing. This was out of my own mailbox, and anything that still went to the old house showed up weeks late and already opened, if at all. I took my complaint to the postal inspectors, but they refused to take the case after hearing a divorce was involved, because they didn't want to get in the middle of a he said, she said thing. Thanks, guys. Sorry enforcing the law is such a chore. Anyway, I forwarded everything I could to my office and would occasionally send myself letters just to make an estimate of what the loss rate was. Some of the stuff was real and some was made up letters about trips I'd gone out, when I was in town, and other nonsense just to confuse her. I was angry and bored one night, and decided I'd really give her something to really think about. I looked up the address of a law firm in my hometown, and an offshore bank in the Bahamas. I cooked up a nice letterhead in Word, and wrote myself a letter confirming that a 6-figure sum had been forwarded from my parents' estate to an offshore bank account, giving details. The next time I was in that town, I dropped it in the local post box. The letter disappeared, of course, and I kind of forgot about it. About a year later, when I was in court dealing with some other ridiculous bullcrap, her lawyer demands that the marital property be redivided as I had fraudulently covered up some major assets. I was floored that she'd gone to all this trouble. I figured she'd eventually catch on, but that it would majorly mess with her head and she would start doubting what of her spying was accurate and where I was gaslighting her. But no! She spends a ton of money on a lawyer to pursue this treasure trove of gold I'd buried on a tropical island. I denied it all, of course. She sent the lawyer to try to subpoena bank records and talk to the other lawyers, and so forth, and they came back to the courts all flustered when they couldn't prove anything. When I pointed out a couple of Easter eggs I'd hidden in the letter, such as that the bank account number was my mother's birthday, and that I'd mentioned a law firm named Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Say it a couple times. Is it like Dewey, Cheatham and Howe? Do we cheat them and how? Ha! In the letter, they went ballistic and demanded the judge prosecute me for impersonating a lawyer. FYI, not actually a crime. And forgery on a nonsense letter I'd mailed to myself? I pointed out that while neither of those accusations would work, they in fact had submitted evidence of a crime, namely theft of US mail, which is a felony, and things got very quiet. The judge actually laughed in their faces and told them they had gotten made fools of and deserved it for stealing mail. That lawyer, her fourth for God's sake, quit soon after, and she's now toothless as she owed money to all of her different lawyers when word started to get around town. I can see it being a real thing. You might say it's fake. I think it's real, and I want to believe it. Posted by user Annie Phoenix, titled, "Where the frick are you from?" So this is a very, very petty revenge. To set the scene, I live in a small European country, and the older generations here can sometimes be incredibly xenophobic, which I really loathe. I am a linguist, and my husband is pretty into languages as well. We like to speak different languages together for fun and practice. So about 3 years ago, we were going home from an event, a theatre visit I think, which had us a bit dressed up. Think tux and a long dress. We were on the subway because parking in the downtown is hard, and at that time of the day, it was faster than a cab when I notice a total Karen with her husband sitting down right across from us. She immediately gave us a look, apparently disturbed by our attire. My husband kept on talking to me, and in a moment I hear the Karen go, "Can you see them? Showing off their money? Freaking Russians!" This made no bloody sense, like what? I nudge my hubby to pay attention to them. Her husband gives a sigh and reacts, "Honey, calm down, and I don't think they're speaking Russian." "Of course they are, listen!" On cue, I switch language and hubby follows. We end up keeping the conversation alternating all the languages we can manage. Spanish, Italian, French, German, Japanese, some Serbian, and of course English. I can see the pair listening with raising frustration, quarreling about us the whole time. After about 3 more stops, we get up and get off the train. The Karen actually gets up and yells after us, "Where the frick are you from?" We smile and wave, and my husband shouts back in our native tongue, "Locals, have a nice evening." Posted by user Who Killed Samantha? I would like to know. Titled, "I let my brother wash his hair with Summer's Eve." For those who don't know, Summer's Eve is a soap for women's intimate parts. It's supposed to be gentler than real soap and aid in cleansing a little better than just water. My 20 female brother, 17, is one of the most spoiled and entitled boys I've ever met. He acts like the world owes him for his existence, and living with him is like constantly walking on eggshells. He always gets what he wants, and he always gets his way. He has all of his own things, and refuses to share, despite having no problem taking from the rest of us. This includes personal hygiene products. He is extremely wasteful, so he gets all of his own things. I share with the 2 youngest siblings, and sometimes guests. There have been times where he accused me of using his products and blew up. I swear you'd think I'd stolen money from the way he acts. I'll admit to using a shared shaving cream once or twice, but never anything else. After the way he blew up, I never touched the shaving cream again. Last summer, my boyfriend left his shaving cream here during a visit, and my brother finished it. He never asked for permission, and he knew it was my boyfriend's. He would get it out of my side of the cabinet and use so much of it each time he shaved. I was ticked, but my boyfriend didn't mind. I just started keeping his stuff in my room when he left things behind. After that, I left my shower items in my room. Recently, I figured that now he had 2 bottles of shampoo and body and face wash, he wouldn't touch mine. So I began leaving my things in the shower, including an expensive shampoo prescribed from my doctor for an ongoing skin condition. I'm only supposed to use it once a week, but I noticed it going pretty quickly. I brushed it off. Earlier, my brother and I were bickering, and he brought up the fact that I recently bought stuff for my mum and my boyfriend, some expensive-ish lotion, but none for him. I mentioned that I wasn't obligated to get him anything, especially when he never bothers getting anything for anyone else. He threw back, "That's why I only use your things." I decided to teach him a lesson or whatever, and I left my Summer's Eve bottle in the shower. I had taken off the label months prior because I didn't need my roommates knowing I was using this product. After he showered, he came and sat with my mum, dad, and I. I instantly recognized the smell, as it had a nice lavender scent, and he had quite obviously used a lot of it. I asked him what he used to wash his hair, and he says he used my shampoo with a cocky attitude. I explained to him that it was in fact a vagina soap. He flipped crap and called me stupid, among other things, but I wasn't fazed. At least he learned not to touch my stuff. My mum thought it was funny, but my dad is ticked that I let his poor boy wash his hair with that soap. He told me that I shouldn't be greedy with my other products, even though I am the one who paid for them in the first place. I'm not sorry. Posted by user J. Rossetti, titled, "My landlord was kind of a tramp, so I pay her rent at the latest possible time." So my landlord is kind of a tramp sometimes. I believe in being frank and honest with whoever I'm renting with so they can prepare and they know what's up. When COVID hit, I gave a heads up that we'd be fine for a few months due to savings, but it's possible we might run into some issues if the lockdown lasts too long. But no worries, we'd get caught up as soon as we could get going on our 3 businesses. She gave this big lecture about how if we can't pay, we need to move out, and she has lawyers for things like this, and will send us a 1-month letter. I blew it off, after telling her that she really should speak to that lawyer, since she legally can't kick anyone out right now, and he would set her straight. 2 months later, I talked and said things are getting a bit tight, and we might run into trouble in a month or 2, but I'll make sure you at least have a month notice. A few days later, the local paper put out info that Illinois might pass a rent freeze and allow affected landlords and such to get paid out a pot so everyone was okay. This was great news. I shared her the link and she calls me on the phone to bark at me about how I just need to move out if I can't pay and she has bills to pay and worry about, and she'll get a lawyer if she has to. I hung up on her mid-sentence. She called again, I ignored it. She texted me same ting she was tramping about. I told her she needs to stop making idle threats, that the only time she has problems with me is when she is rude and I tell her to pound sand, and that whether she likes it or not, she is still bound to the law. Well, lucky for her, they haven't wiped out late fees for late rent by law, but it is in contract that we can pay up until the 5th with no late fee. So now, instead of paying 2 or 3 days early, I have a monthly alarm set, and I send her funds at 10 minutes before the cutoff and take a screenshot. If they waive late fees and evictions at any point, I full-on intend to withhold and save her rent until the last legal day possible to avoid any penalties, and pay her then. Posted by user Angel Guide Indie, titled, "He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Obligatory apology for formatting as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's, both of us really proud. This is going to be long, so TLDR at the bottom. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sister's ex-boyfriend Paul, ex-boyfriend's new wife Jane, ex-boyfriend's parents Mr. and Mrs. Doe, oldest brother Zeke, our parents, and me. When I was 14, and my oldest sister Sarah was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time, that is. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in, the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hypermesis, which, if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, well, your body is built to do this. It can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited. both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you want to name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, Sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky. He'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I looked back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and the baby was going to come on Valentine's Day, whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in, but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mum and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers, while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation, discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork, as she would have been out for surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name, and still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew that was born on Valentine's Day was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about that name. He'd even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So, Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual and friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid and that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big sugar, and she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentlepeoples, this was my chance. I asked her what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Bray-Tlee-Yay-Yay-Yay. You know the ones I'm talking about. Brilliant Lele. What kind of name is that? And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So, I, conniving little weasel I am, said, what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it. She stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with X's name to remind him every day about her, and also to remind him to pay his frickin' child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it, and she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a great father to Val. Posted by user Deadlock1989, titled, Good Luck Paying for the Car. So this isn't my story. It happened to a friend of a friend, so exact details are difficult to get, but this is what I was told. For ease of story and to hide identities, the names I will use are Jack and Jill. Bit of backstory. Jack and Jill had been going out for nearly 5 years by the point of this story. A year prior, Jill lost her job due to the company she worked for being liquidated. Money got tight for Jill, so Jack offered to help by covering her car payments, monthly installment, road tax, insurance, and fuel, so she could put the money she got to rent and utilities until she got a new job and was financially stable. Jack had a fairly decent job, so wasn't a strain on his income. A year goes by and Jill is still unemployed, but not through rejections. She got lazy and just spent all day doing nothing around her house while Jack was at work. One day, Jack gets work off early and decides to surprise Jill on the way back home, but as he is approaching her house, he sees another car in her driveway. He parks on the street and sneaks up to the house, and looks through the window to see Jill with another man. Jill was ticked, but he didn't burst in there, he walked away, got in his car and drove off. When Jack got home, he did a little digging and found out who the guy was through Facebook and found she had been having an affair for half a year with this guy. He was now really ticked off and wanted revenge, and he knew the best way to do it. This is where the revenge comes in. Jill loved her car, even though she barely used it. So what Jack did was stop all the payments that were going out of his bank account and put them onto her account. As the car was in her name, it was easy to do. As the payments had only just gone out, he had to wait for the end of the month for his revenge to unfold. The end of the month comes, and Jill's bank card is declined at the shops. She calls the bank up to find out what is going on, and they tell her she has gone overdrawn because of the car payments going out of her account. Jill phoned Jack and asked why the payment is coming out of her accounts and not his. Jack coldly replied, "Because I know you cheated on me, and I'm not going to pay for my ex-girlfriend's car," and hung up. Fallout of the revenge. She tried to get Jack to pay for the car, even got lawsuits involved, but as she was the sole owner of the car, it was declared he had not legal responsibility to pay for her car. As she couldn't afford her road tax or insurance, she couldn't drive the car, and eventually she got so far behind in the payments that the car was repossessed. To pay the debt, She had to get a minimum wage job and now takes the bus to and from work. G'day there guys, outro Markee here. Hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed making it today. If you did, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Tell me what you thought about it down below. Also, if you like memes, be sure to head on over to my second channel, Markee 2. It should be one of the sexy Australian faces on screen, the one without the flag. It's my latest and greatest creation, and I hope you like it. Also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my channel members and Patreon subscribers. You guys do so much good for me, and the support goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I love you guys, and I appreciate all the help and support you provide me on this channel. Also, if you want to join the family, links are down in the description below, or click that join button next to the subscribe button. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed that one today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!